What's good, everybody? It is your intrepid host, Tanner, aka PaladinProse, and today we are welcoming a very special guest to the channel. We have Jean-Luc with us from the Dungeons Key. Thank you so much for talking with me today, man.
Thanks so much for having me, Tanner.
Yeah, no problem. And so Jean-Luc is just, as of recording, has just wrapped up is this your second Kickstarter?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. So your second Kickstarter for Kavlov Sanctuary, which was, or is still, a Mork Borg adventure module, and you were working on a OSC conversion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I teamed up with the Hexpress YouTube channel on this one. So Todd Terwilliger, fantastic guy, and just been a really, really great resource to work with. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So I guess it would be best to just get right into it. And I think any good RPG player has a good origin story. So getting into things here, yeah. I mean, I'm really interested. We've talked before, but I'm really interested to hear how you got into role-playing games, what your lineage is with D&D, and we'll go from there.
So unlike I think a lot of folks that are sort of working in this domain, I got into Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing at a very young age, but I was never able to sort of establish a group or take it any further. So although I was exposed to role-playing, I want to say as early as the ages of 8 or 9, through friends who were playing at at school. It wasn't until much later, I want to say early 20s, that I actually started playing, and then it wasn't even really D&D at the time. I was playing GURPS and a few other systems, and then finally I was able to establish a group that lasted for a little over 3 years, and I was just GMing the whole time. Before that, I even played some 4th edition, a little bit of 3.5 and some other systems, but it wasn't until that a group sort of got together and wanted to put something for 5e that it kind of lasted. And that's why, I mean, although I don't it's not that I don't like 5e or kind of D&D. It's just that for me, I just wanted to play. I wanted to GM. I wanted to write stories, create stories with people, and 5e was the most accessible game at the time, and it just worked out really, really well. Went on for 3 years. It was a lot of fun. So
it wasn't really about Dungeons and Dragons per se. It was more just about role playing that really caught your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the same time, I also think that for me, Dungeons and Dragons as a whole was a little bit nostalgic, because this was what we kind of approached. It's what we played as kids. So yeah, to be able to say that I was playing like Dungeons and Dragons proper, it felt like I felt good about it. As you learn more and more about just RPGs in general and the community, then it kind of just goes to show how much more there is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's a great segue. I don't know about you, but I GM'd or, DM'd 5th edition D&D for 4 or 5 years before I kind of hit this wall of burnout. And it was only up until that point that I started looking for alternatives. And that's how I came across the OSR. So I'm interested about, obviously, you've written for Mork Borg, you've written for other Stockholm Cartel books or systems as well. So what was your first introduction to the OSR scene?
I always knew about OSR, right? I had friends that played, AD&D, first, second edition. And then I want to say that I'm trying to think. I mean, other than Mork Borg, I mean, obviously the different space stuff. I read a lot of, I think it was Polyhedron magazine. Again, back in my sort of college heydays, as a means of sort of improving my my own GMing capabilities and skills, and sort of developing, kind of honing that craft. So I would say that, Polyhedron magazine and Dragon magazine were 2 magazines that I actually read a lot of before I was even writing or GMing, very, very heavily, just as a means of, like I said, honing the craft and becoming inspired. And then I would say that after, I wrapped up this 3-year, it wasn't one campaign. We had 2 plus campaigns over the course of 3 years. I started exploring more rules-like systems, primarily because my group was one that I think that between the 6 of them, maybe 2 players owned the player's handbook, it was a much more relaxed group. No one was min-maxing. I think in the 3 years, maybe one person took the dodge action. Like, it's like people weren't really reading the rules, you know? So I was like, well, maybe we can dumb this down a little bit. And I don't mean by dumb, I mean, you know, just kind of like.
I know exactly what you mean.
So yeah.
Chop the fat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for me, like when I found this scene, it felt very punk rock to me, like this DIY. Like we don't have to. We can kind of like cast off the shackles of Watsy, and you know we don't have to play by anyone's rules. And for me too, that was really appealing.
Yeah, it almost comes across as like a Fight Club type thing until you realize that actually it's much larger than you think it is, and realize that actually this is like a whole machine of just that just like keeps with cogs and people and then you realize that it's like it's so much more fledged out than you originally thought, and then you really want to start, you know, collaborating with people, you know, getting into, and I mean, especially with Borg, and I don't know what content is like for other systems. You know, I'm sure that maybe you know you have just as many people writing stuff for Call of Cthulhu or Vampire the Masquerade, because those systems have been out for a very long time, right? So, and they've got dedicated communities. But for me, you know, when I saw Borg and, you know, even just coming across like the Borg subreddit, like the amount of content being published by the community that was freely available to everyone was just amazing. And that's actually how I decided to start writing and publishing for Borg in the first place. Was I wanted to just give back to the community. I was doing pay what you want. And it wasn't until, you know, I made a few bucks and I'm thinking like, you know, $10-20, you know, selling, you know, some of my first modules, that I realized like maybe this was like a viable side hustle.
And that was also another very expert segue into my next question for you. No, it's totally cool. But I am super curious. Like, so for me, I kind of have always been a forever DM, right? And you put a lot of work into it. And I also do professional writing as well. But for a long time, D&D or like the TRPG hobby space and, you know, getting paid to write were not two things that I ever thought could go hand in hand for a long time. But what was it exactly that inspired you to get into TRPG publishing? And then I'd also really like to dive into just kind of the whole journey to getting to the point where you have 2 successful Kickstarters. Your products are on Exalted Funeral. And I think for a lot of people that are interested in doing that, they would love to know, you know, how you get from ideation to having your book on Exalted Funeral.
I mean, honestly, it feels like this really wild ride right now. And it's like surreal, because I want to say that I started, you know, about a year and a half ago. So to get to where I am now, it took a lot of hard work, but it was actually a lot easier than most people would actually think. So to answer, I guess, the first question on how I got into publishing in the first place, you know, at first, I've always had, you know, I've always needed sort of creative outlets. And one of the things that I ultimately did for my group, right, is we first, we started off with, you know, just kind of like a 5th edition module. At the time, we picked up Dragon Heist, and I eventually homebrewed, you know, most of that campaign. And then we led into like the second season, and we had a whole pirate themed. And from there, you know, we decided, okay, well, we're gonna wrap things up there. We're gonna end it. And I asked my group what they wanted to do, and they said, well, we wanted to do something homebrew. We wanted to do something that was like, you know, about survival. And so I thought, well, what better way than to go and just create a new world or setting for my players. I'd seen a bunch of folks online that, you know, they'd created and published, you know, small books and things like that for their players. And then once I'd done that once, I kind of had like an itch for, you know, working on these sorts of things again. So it was really easy for me once I decided to start writing content for Borg to publish it. And then just quickly after that, you know, wanted to just keep doing it. And so I just kept publishing to Drivethru RPG and just kept upping my game, you know, figuring out new techniques, you know, improving the writing, adding more art. And then from there, it was sort of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I just published my first adventure on Drivethru RPG, so I'm starting to dip my toes into it as well. What advice would you give aspiring indie publishers as far as choosing where you publish your adventures and why?
That's a very good question. Well, I don't want to be too crass, right? And talking numbers, right? But I think that for anyone who's looking to get into the hobby seriously, right, either as a side hustle or professionally, right, for a living, you know, you gotta think about the numbers, right? And so Drivethru RPG and itch.io are 2 places I can think of. There's a whole slew of other online resellers like Exalted Funeral, for instance. Generally speaking, what you'll want to consider is, well, the margins that you can make, right? So if you're an exclusive partner with Drivethru RPG, for instance, you get 70% of the revenue. They take a 30% cut. If you're not exclusive, it's 65-35. Itch.io is a bit more flexible because you get to choose, I believe, the percentage of royalty, if you will, that the platform takes. So those are kinds of things that you'll want to take into consideration. But if you're really just doing it just to kind of get your stuff out there, I really think that Drivethru RPG has been a phenomenal resource for the community. Especially when you become like a partner publisher, like once you I think you have to have published I think three modules, or for at least, and they need to be on the platform for at least 3 months. Then you can become like an official partner, and then you get access to like a bunch more tools, advanced tools on Drivethru RPG for advertising and gathering stats on what you're selling. And of course, you got access then to the official partner Discord, which has been phenomenal. So you can, so there's lots of resources on the official Drivethru RPG Discord as well. Once you become an official publisher under Drivethru. It's been phenomenal. And you got a lot of folks there that are either looking for work or looking to hire as well. So if you are an artist, that's a really good place to start, because you can also sell art on Drivethru RPG and do a whole bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah, man. Networking and like reaching out and connecting with people, I think is huge. I mean, obviously that's how we met. People always say it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So I think that obviously applies to this industry as well. Something that struck me that you said just a bit earlier is that as you were publishing new things on Drivethru, you're trying to step up your game. What are things that people should be looking out for as they continue to publish to get better and, get more downloads and get their name out more and more?
So first, to kind of remove any, doubts from folks that think that, it takes money to get started. I mean, there's so many free tools out there that you could use, like Scribus, is a publishing or layout tool that you could use that's open source. Paint.net or GIMP, are two other, photo editing software. So that's how I got started. And that's where I would say that then from that point on, you can sort of increase, the skill level and you can improve on the overall look and feel of the content. Making sure that you look at what other folks are doing in the sort of the same genre or area that you're working on, I think is super important. I'm not one to kind of, I'm not trying to, it's not about stealing ideas, but it's looking at the quality of the workmanship that these other publishers are doing, and then setting goals for yourself, right? And so I mean, wow, that was amazing. If we look at the work that Johan Noor did, it's obviously inspired several layouts for me in some of my personal, Mork Borg books. Obviously, Kavlov Sanctuary is nothing like that, but you've got to be able to sort of set goals for yourself, and then again, you can either, change the software you're using to be more professional and stuff like that. Things like if you're doing the art yourself, which, I strongly encourage, for folks getting started, because it kind of really gives them an idea on like how the whole thing works, from end to end. And you can use, public domain art and stuff like that. Hopefully that answers your question to some degree. I'm losing my train of thoughts here a little bit, but lots of different ways that you can sort of improve on the work that you're doing over time.
Yeah, no, I think that was all great insight. It's just, I think for a lot of people too that don't have a lot of experience taking it seriously, right? It can be hard to know what you're doing wrong or like what could be better.
Sure.
I think those are all great points. I think something too that we've seen in the TTRPG indie space, especially this year, are like a ton of massive Kickstarters. There was the really big Old School Essentials reprinting Kickstarter. There's Shadow Dark that's like smashing records. There was Knave 2. Kavlov's, you guys have.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I am incredibly flattered that you would go Old School Essentials, Knave 2, Shadow Dark, Kavlov's. I'm like, we're talking on a magnitude of a few $1 million less. Kavlov's slice, a really small slice, but I'm flattered that you're
right. No, I mean, I appreciate your humility, but I mean, for me at least, and then there's also Dolmenwood. I'm so.
Oh my God! I mean, it
looks just gorgeous.
Yeah, it was at Eat the Reich, I think, is out right now, and then a bunch of other really cool OSC campaigns like a Wind Wraith. I think just wrapped up. Gross like $80,000 or $90,000. Just like looked amazing.
Big numbers, man.
Yeah, massive.
And that's the thing. So I mean, it really kind of, I don't want to say jarred me because that has kind of like a negative connotation, but just this past year too, I've realized like, you know, maybe we're not like such weirdos, you know what I mean? Maybe this isn't so niche. Like there's a huge market out there. And so how did you
we're
get
nerds,
from
right? So
we are
I've
huge
got
nerds.
I've got money, you know, in my pockets, and I don't want to spend it on, you know, hot rods and, you know, fancy dinners. You know, I want to buy, you know, indie products that have been, you know, hand stapled and, you know, hand drawn. And so, yeah, sorry, I interrupted your question, but
no, it's totally okay. And no worries at all. But yeah, so I wanted to ask, like, I feel like it's kind of that next step up. It's like the graduation. So you've published on Drivethru for a while, you're finding some success on Drivethru, and then what sparked you to do a Kickstarter campaign for the Mork version of Kavlov's?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for me, I think it was the scale of the project and the direction I knew I wanted to head in. I think as important as, you know, having goals for just creating content is, I think it's equally as important to have goals for where you want to take the hobby, where you want to take the side hustle, or where you want to take this as a business. Just recently I've incorporated, and that wasn't, you know, by happenstance. This is something that I knew. Thank you. Yeah. And that was something that I knew I wanted to do. Right. As soon as, you know, I kind of that switch kind of flipped in my head and I said, well, you know, I've made, you know, $100 on Drivethru. I was like, this could be a reasonable side hustle. You know, like I'm writing this content anyway. And it looks like the community appreciates it. And if people want to continue to support me in sort of this creative endeavor, like, why not? And so I always knew that, you know, crowdfunding was going to be a direction that I wanted to take. But if I'm being completely honest, I didn't ever think that I was going to be doing it so early. And it basically came as a result of just the size, the magnitude of the work that went into putting Kavlov's together. I was taking time off work to work on Kavlov's. I was spending, you know, 20 to 30 hours a week just writing Kavlov's on top of the, you know, 40 plus hour week I have.
That's a full-time job.
Full-time, yeah. So after I was 2 months into writing Kavlov's, and I just it just kept getting bigger. I was like, man, I'll do 5 dungeons. And then I was like, no, I'll do 8. And then it was like 13 dungeons with a whole lore section. And then I was like, well, I'm doing that, I'm going to add classes. And then I added classes. I was like, this is a huge book. And what I decided to do was, well, I mean, Drivethru RPG, again, is fantastic in not only the services they offer you, but the support that they give you as well as an independent creator. So Drivethru, although I was an exclusive publisher, what they don't do is that if you want to sell physical copies of the book, that's not exclusive. You're only exclusive in the digital partnership. More importantly, they will also allow you to do crowdfunding, and they won't take a cut. Right? They will only take the cut because you're sending complimentary copies at that point. So you crowdfund the book, you write the book, and then you publish it on Drivethru RPG. You distribute it to Drivethru RPG, and as long as you're, you know, they've got a couple rules, like you've got to, you know, have some logos on there, you know, to advertise that you're distributing through Drivethru and stuff like that. But outside of that, like, they're completely supportive. And frankly, I would say that if it hadn't been for that, I likely wouldn't have gone forward with it. But because I got so much support from Drivethru to do that, I just said, let's do it. The book is big enough. And I also was really curious to do a print-on-demand hardcover as well. And I thought that might interest people. So those were all of the reasons together that I decided to kind of give it a shot. And it was a fantastic success.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I commend you on the bravery of just going for it too. I think the first time we chatted, I think I told you, like, my friend had sent me an ad that he had saw on Instagram of the cover of Kavlov's. And so you did some digital advertising, I believe. How did you get the word out for the Kickstarter?
Just a small correction. I only just started doing digital advertising for Kavlov's with the OSC edition. It was my first time dabbling there. To your point, they saw it on Instagram, and that's because I knew I needed, again, to start growing my social media presence. Right. And again, that all lines up with sort of the plan I had for growing this as a business. And although I am terrible at social media, I've gotten a lot better at it over the last year and a half. Like, you know, I've got like maybe 80 followers on Twitter, you know, 100 followers on Instagram. Like, but you start by just posting and trying to post as regularly as you can to keep folks that, you know, support your content informed or interested, or just to kind of gain new followers. So I don't doubt that that's how they probably first came across, you know, that post. Of course, you want to post on on Reddits, you know, the OSR subreddits, the Mork subreddits. So that's what I focused on primarily, was just growing my brand and growing my following on social media. And then just now I started doing a little bit of advertising for the first time on Reddit, just as kind of take a look at what that was like. And it was all right.
I talk to so many people in my professional life. I do a lot of search engine optimization. So it's not the most glamorous thing in the world, but I have a lot of friends that are in creative spaces and they express frustration because they're talented artists and they're putting their work out there, but there has to be a strategy behind how you're getting it out there. You know what I mean? If you just post on Instagram, unfortunately, no one's going to see it. You know what I mean? You have to be strategic about how you go.
I totally agree. And so like, but even like as a new creator who, who's been able to, to earn a little bit of income and can afford to actually hire artists now, I'm actually finding it rather difficult to find artists. Not too difficult. I found a couple that I've managed to work with so far, but like I don't know how to navigate that landscape. I don't know which sites to use to go find these folks, how reliable people are, what to pay people. Like all of that is super intimidating as well. And you don't want to insult people too, right? Especially when you don't have a lot of money to pay them. So it can be really, really challenging to navigate that space. But I would say up until now, everyone's been super welcoming. And as long as you're upfront about or transparent about what your budget is like, you can typically find people to work with. Or like I said, you could always turn to like things like public domain or, pro bono work or, exchange services. I'll help you with this if you help me with that. So lots of opportunities there as well.
If you're a working artist looking for some work, hit up Jean-Luc, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then that's another great point, kind of rounding the corner on this discussion. I feel like I could talk to you all day, man. But
we could, honestly.
I am super excited for the OSC version of Kavlov's. I love Mork Borg, but Old School Essentials, I think, is probably my personal favorite system. I just love Gavin's work. I love Necrotic Gnome, and it's just a joy to play. And the art that you are showing off for the OSE edition of Kavlov's is super sick. So I would love to hear about how you went about commissioning the artwork and what that process was like. Speaking of getting artists some work.
And I don't mean to contradict you, but but I actually came across Lucas's work, or hashtag or at Vault Crawler on Instagram. I came across his work on Instagram. Vault Crawler. I mean, what a sick name, right? And so I don't want to pronounce their last name. I'm sure I'll butcher it, but Lucas was just really, really great. And it was really one of those things where I just sent him an Instagram message, saying, hey, are you open to commissions? What are your rates? And I was able to I sketched something out for him in terms of like what I wanted the cover of the book to look like. And he nailed it out of the park. Like I can't thank Lucas enough because it's so sick. It's so I was so pleased, and it's kind of a cross a little bit between what you would typically, what you might see in Mork Borg, but with that sort of OSE flavor. It looked phenomenal. And I would seriously consider working with Lucas again.
Dude, he nailed it. He really understood the assignment. I love the kind of like weird fantasy vibe that OSE art tends to have, but then it definitely has that more like grungier, like death metal kind of Mork Borg vibe to it as well.
I mean, and I would love to work with, I think, who is it? Look, I've got the book here now. Peter Mullen as well, who did the original art for OSE and for a few others. I've reached out to him. Fingers crossed. We can
awesome.
Work on something in the future.
I'm putting out the vibes for you, man.
We'll see.
That's super exciting. Now will the OSC version of Kavlov's, will that be on Exalted Funeral as well?
I'm glad you asked. Actually, in all likelihood, it will be. So I've reached out to them, and we're kind of just we're working things out. I can't say when or how that's gonna. No, exactly. And but obviously, my biggest the biggest thing I'm going to do, of course, is to honor the commitment first to my backers. I think like that's what I want to do first and foremost, is to make sure that I can get the book in the hands of my backers, the digital and physical editions, before kind of closing the door on the Kickstarter and moving forward, because that to me it's so important to support the folks who are supporting me, right, and making sure that they're the ones getting access to the PDF first, for instance, before like instead of releasing it on Drivethru RPG and giving it to my backers at the same time. I kind of want to wrap the campaign up first, and that is to deliver all of the rewards ahead of launching my products on Drivethru or any other platform. And that way, it's just a little bit more premium, a little bit more exclusive. You've got access to the book for, almost 2, maybe 3 months before anyone else does, you know, as a thank you, right?
Yeah, and before we go, I did want to ask if you could touch on real quick what it was like working with Exalted Funeral, because I'm sure, again, for aspiring TRPG creators, that is a big deal to have your product up on their web store and their site.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, at least for me, you know, I was fanboying a little bit, you know, you know, getting my products on Exalted. I told my partner, I said to her, you know, I was maybe, you know, 6 months in, you know, and I was still publishing, you know, just to Drivethru and nowhere else.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I'll know I've made it when I've published to Exalted. And no, you know, nothing against Exalted, but I realize now that there's so much more than that, right? Like, frankly speaking, you know, it's one of those things where you just gotta shoot your shot. So to be completely frank, I reached out to Exalted before my first Kickstarter, right? And I kind of pitched to them Kavlov Sanctuary. But you know, they're busy, and I didn't let that slow me down. They didn't get back to me right away. I reached out to get, and that's the thing, right? You know, if you try, you know, if you try and fail, try and try again. You don't take things personally in this business. They didn't get back to me, you know, on my first pitch of Kavlov's, and I didn't take it personally. I finished the campaign. I did what I said I was going to do anyway, and then I reached out to them. I said, okay, you know, you weren't there, you know, for the Kickstarter, but it was successfully funded, and I'm going to be doing this work anyway. Does that change your mind? Are you interested? Are you interested now? And they got back to me and said, oh yeah, sorry, we never got around to your first email. We would love to see, you know, what you've put together. And then from that point on, it's about just, you know, again, it's about who you know. And once you've sort of gotten your foot in the door, then it's up to you, right? As a publisher or writer to get the rest of the work done. I got proofs, you know, made up, and then I was okay with the work. And finally, long story short, you know, we were able to make a deal happen. And, you know, I got some copies of the Mork edition of Kavlov's on Exalted.
So awesome.
It was, you could say that it was like a dream come true, but you know, it was just the first of many dreams that I plan on setting for myself.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. I think like at the end of the day, it really is cliche advice, but if you're a writer, an artist, or anything, it's all about like 100 rejections, 1,000 rejections before you get accepted.
Well, absolutely. And you can't take it personally either, right? And even if someone like I've seen some folks, you know, and at this point, Kavlov has been reviewed several times, and I've seen some folks who just outright, you know, disagree, you know, didn't like it or didn't like parts of the book, and that's perfectly fine, right? Like it's totally okay for people not to like it or not to want it. Work on the next one or do the next one, and don't let it slow you down.
Hell yeah, man. I love it. Well, I mean, I think we covered basically everything I wanted to get to. It's a really inspiring story. And the thing that I really hope that, you know, my viewers take away from this conversation is that if you are like us, if you are a big, passionate nerd like you and I, and you have notebooks full of stuff that you think is really cool that you would love to get out there, it's totally possible.
Just do
all of these places and cool resources that Jean-Luc has mentioned. I'll put links in the description down below. And then also I wanted to give you, Sarah, an opportunity, one final plug for any of your stuff, anything that you would like folks here to check out. Let us know.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much. So of course, I mean, for the listening audience, you can find me firstly on social media, you know, at The Dungeons Key. That's on Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, you name it. I've got my website as well, you know, thedungeonskey.com. So I post all of my content there. On Drivethru RPG, same thing, The Dungeons Key. And then as far as plugs, I mean, the OSC edition of Kavlov Sanctuary, you can obviously find on you'll be able to find on Drivethru RPG in a few months. All the links are going to be down in the description, I'm sure. You know, I would say is, you know, like and follow. You know, you can join my mailing list as well, which is available on my website. I'm constantly working on new projects. I got, you know, a second book. The working title is Dwellers of the Borg, which is sort of like an extension of Kavlov Sanctuary. We kind of delves into the Borg area, gives it a lot more flavor, new dungeons, new classes. It's gonna be super exciting. I'm working on all sorts of things. A sci-fi inspired TTRPG, a brand new gaming system and game, you know, inspired by the likes of, you know, Starship Troopers and Aliens. So yeah, I mean, who doesn't like those kinds of things? So check. You know, if you follow me, you can hear a lot more about what's going on there. And we've already even started publishing some of the art that's coming out for Dwellers of the Borg on Instagram and Twitter, so people can see a lot of cool stuff there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. PaladinProse exclusive. Lots of awesome things to
be
excited for the Dungeons Key. So
100%.
Jean-Luc, thank you so much for talking with me today, dude. It was a blast to have you on the channel. We should do this again sometime soon. And for everybody else, until next time, venture forth.